This is a story of celebration, a time to tip your lid to the drovers and the farmers of Circular Head in northwest Tasmania.
There's a need to celebrate the early settlers of Circular Head and to match them with the hard rock miners who populated the west coast of Tasmania. The peasant farmers who followed the Van Diemen's Land Company into Circular Head in the 1830s bought their land, used axe, mattock and saw to change swamp and button grass plain and primeval forest into the most productive farmland in the world. They were continually looking for new markets for their product, and obviously as the mining towns of the west coast were developing, they identified a new market. The farmers of the far northwest coast accessed that market by driving the cattle down the west coast. It was full of hardship, it was full of heroic deeds from time to time, but equally it was full of humour and humorous stories, and I think this cattle drive captures the mix of all those things, and it shows that in the year 2004, as we celebrate our bicentenary, that the same character is alive and well, and indeed we need to nurture it into the future.
Welcome aboard the Arcadia 2. My name's Philip and the skipper today is Tony.
When white settlers first arrived in Tasmania, they discovered a prehistoric landscape. Much of it covered with dense forests, ancient trees, deep rivers and gorges, inhabited by a race of people they didn't even begin to understand. Despite the unpredictable climate and the virtually impenetrable forests, it was explored and then exploited. While early settlement was concentrated in the more accessible Midlands and East Coast, gradually farms, families and foresters spread north and then northwest. Apart from the ill-fated convict settlement on Sarah Island in Macquarie Harbour, only miners and timber getters bothered with the wilder areas of the west coast. Now tourists flock to these areas, drawn by its wilderness and stories of pioneers, drovers and times past.
At the end of the race out there in the water, that's the drop-off point, so once the cattle get to there, they have to swim.
They know how to swim naturally, do they?
Oh, they do, yes, yeah.
Since the 1880s, farmers have not only run cattle among the sand dunes and on the beaches, but also used the coastal strip as a beef highway, moving mobs from Circular Head south across the rivers and streams to the hungry miners of Zeehan and Queenstown. The northwest corner of Tasmania is now a land of milk and honey, boasting some of the richest agricultural soils in the world, a place where farms feed produce to giant vegetable processors and dairy factories, with a flourishing timber industry. For the early settlers, it was an epic struggle, clearing land, growing food, building houses, trying to grow commercial crops and somehow get them to distant markets. Most were peasant farmers, eking out an existence far from the basic services that we all take for granted today. Yet many of the original pioneering families survive to this day.
My family, well, I came from England originally, but they built everything from scratch. So they had to build their sawmill, they had to build railway lines in those days, which was a lot of heartache because it all had to be done manually. There was no mechanical means then. My father and his brothers used to tell me religiously that we had it fairly good because in the days when they were there, after they'd moved from Christmas Hills, that's where the school was, they moved to Britton Swamp. They'd have to walk from Britton Swamp probably about 4 k's, especially winter time when there was ice, frosts on the ground. They'd walk up there with bare feet. They'd have to crack the ice with their bare feet and then turn around at the night time and walk home, and then eventually they got the luxury of getting a horse where they could pile 4 or 5 kids onto a horse and go back up to school that way.
These days, not only is Ross Britton running the family's specialist Blackwood sawmilling business, he's also the chairman of the Arthur Pieman Conservation Area Multiple Land Use Committee, helping local landowners maintain their historic links with the past, as they adduced cattle down on the coastal plains during winter. The celebrations in Circular Head kick off with the launch of a local history.
It's a different country down there. In brief, a history of the pioneer farming families of the far northwest, the mining communities of the west coast, and the descendants of both. A history of cattle drives, of cattle adjustment, and a whole deal more.
That it is a pioneering land. It is a land that has been used by the people of Tasmania for more than 100 years for both commercial and recreational purposes, and it remains today a very, very important corridor of recreation and commercial activity that we treasure and we should defend at every opportunity.
They've been dancing and droving in Circular Head since white settlers first arrived. And they haven't lost their touch, even though many would be happier on horseback or motorbike following a mob of cattle down the coast. But they know how to kick up their heels in true bush community style. It's time to wish the droving team well, to send them on their way as the Greenham's Bicentennial Cattle Drive gets underway tomorrow. The drive is about to begin with a breakfast at the Redpa football oval, and there's hardly a local who isn't there. It's a good time for bards and minstrels to do their thing.
When the sun comes up on the top of Redpa Hill, you can hear a voice ring out in the morning chill. Get back, you mongrel.
All this was made possible because the new boys in town, Greenham's, who have revamped the meatworks, have coughed up and cashed up for the celebrations.
They left the northwest paddocks, their families and their friends, went south beyond the hamlets and where the roadway ends. They took the cattle with them, for miners had to eat, so they drove the cattle southward to bring the miners meat.
Everyone's getting ready to send off the droving team and their stock, accompanied by a group of recreational riders who will also travel down the coast on this great adventure. It's time to capture the dreams and aspirations of many. The world seems a peaceful place. The cattle are behaving and the horses are too, and all is going to plan. But this adventure is not without its dramas, for already the word is out that 2 days ride away, protesters are gathering at the narrow Arthur River Bridge. It would mean danger to riders, horses and cattle alike.
My earliest recollections of cattle going down the coast would be when I was a kid, about 6-year-old, and I used to watch the big mobs of cattle driving down the road there. The various stockmen with them. I knew a lot of the people. I knew who a lot of the mobs belonged to. I used to really watch them in awe, all these cattle going down, with all the dogs and the drovers. But these big mobs of beef stuff going down, they really fascinated me.
On most drives, particularly in winter, there is hidden danger. The beaches and rivers of the west coast are famous for their quicksand. Many vehicles have been swallowed up and disappeared. Cattle and horses alike can be caught in its deadly embrace. The owner of this vehicle caught unawares by swirling water and sucking sand.
I remember one time I was down there with Fentons, and we was actually crossing the Pedder, and we had 16 of them bogged in the one hit, and you got to work pretty well to get them out, not only because of the quicksand, but there was in water in the creek, and to save them from drowning and that type of thing. And that in itself can be a bit of a hazard too, because 9 times out of 10 when you get them out, they'll take to you. They seem to get real panicky, and they don't they don't appreciate it.
All has gone well as the first day draws to a close. The cattle will spend a night in a holding paddock. Tomorrow brings the Arthur River Bridge crossing, and the protesters are gathering to have their say. And there is tension in the droving crew about what will happen. As dawn breaks, the weather turns nasty. Gale force winds whip the seas into a white-cap frenzy. Hundreds of protesters and supporters have gathered at the bridge. Slowly, drovers, cattle and riders draw closer to the narrow crossing. The police are out in force.
It had potential to be an absolute disaster zone. As we started to come up onto the bridge, I seen, like all those people there. I didn't actually realise there was quite so many on the other side of the bridge, and I was a little bit apprehensive. I thought, well, hope this all goes well. Got to the other side and I thought, I realised the people were actually really, really close to this end. And I thought, oh no, I just hope the cows come off. I hope the cows come off. Because, they could have really turned on the bridge and, there could have been a lot of pressure. Rails could have been broke, cows could have fell over, which would have been like the worst possible scenario, probably. Or they could have come off the bridge at a fair rate and seen all those people and run over the top of the crowd, and that would have been horrible. But really, the way it happened, it couldn't have been as if we had just planned it or rehearsed it for 10 days. The crowd was they were quiet. Even the few protesters there were very respectful of what we were doing. And, we were very appreciative of the fact that they were so respectful. It was a huge ask for those cows to come through that crowd of people as well as they did. And, but yeah, they just responded to everything they were told to do. The type of cows you could actually talk to them with your voice instead of, with a whip or anything, and just say, come on girls, this way girls, and off they'd go, yeah. I got off my horse and my legs nearly caved in, but I was hugely relieved.
These cows are coming to the end of their journey. In time-honoured tradition, they'll spend the winter on the nearby coastal plains. Then, with their new calves beside them, return to Perry King's farm. Tomorrow, a new mob of cattle will leave Tema Farm, heading south for Sandy Cape, in the second stage of the Bicentennial Cattle Drive. The final and most dangerous part will be stage 3, when 10 head from the second mob will be driven further down the coast, then swum across the Pieman River to the celebrations at Don Smith's Zeehan Farm. The King family first settled this area in the late 1800s. 4 generations on, they're still raising cattle and adjusting stock down the coastal strip in winter. It's part of the normal cycle of seasons on Perry King's farm. It's these stock that will travel south in the first leg of the Bicentennial Cattle Drive. The cows will spend all winter grazing around the sand dunes and beaches of the Arthur Pieman Conservation Area.
Our farms have been established in the lines of running cattle in the Arthur Pieman. It's an integral part of how we manage and run our farms, maintain the stocking rates that keep our farms viable. If we didn't have the opportunity to go there, we wouldn't be able to run the stock we do, and we probably wouldn't be able to farm our farms in a lot of cases. I can remember as a 12 or 13, 14-year-old being chucked on the back of an old horse and saying, well, whatever you do, just keep following the cattle, and someone would be waiting at the other end to pick us up. You're doing something that your father did, your grandfather did, your great-grandfather did. You might not know exactly when he did it or how he did it or how he got there, but he might have done it on a horse. We're doing it on a 4-wheel motorbike. It's just, I don't know, it's just maintaining that link to your past.
Today, an early start. The word is out that more protesters will try and stop the drive. Everybody is briefed on what to do and where to go.
Just in case there's a bit of a protest down at Greens Creek area. We might take a bit of a detour.
I'm among the lucky minority who are able to do this. Basically, we've put aside 9 days to do this trip. I've done lots of different things in my life, and I came down to this one not really knowing what to expect. I've been hugely surprised that it has had so much support on the West Coast. The feeling of when we came across that bridge and suddenly the people realised it was safe to clap because we had the cattle over, it brought lumps to our throat, and I know the stockman who was riding beside me had tears in his eyes. And that's how we felt, because we're passionate about what we're doing. We're passionate that this sort of land must be kept open for everybody to use sensitively. There is room for all groups to participate in their activities in this sort of area, and we must keep these traditions alive.
The day is uneventful. Protesters were avoided with the daylight start.
Animals, strangely enough, are quite smart in, like the cattle, even if cattle haven't been here before, they seem to have like a sixth sense of bog, or, I mean, there's the odd beast that, we've had the odd beast get caught in quicksand, but even the horses, they never get caught twice. Yeah, if you get a horse that gets half stuck in quicksand or goes down in quicksand, he's very, very cautious and remembers that next time, and he seems to sense, we go along the beach, you'll be just walking like that and the horse will go like that, and you wonder why, and it's 9 times out of 10 is because there's probably been a bit of quicksand there or something, generally, if you've had your horse long enough down here, if he's decided something, you don't question that. And the cattle are the same. They walk a certain place on a certain track for a certain reason, and 9 times out of 10 is because it's a lot harder over there. Mostly when you bring stock down the beach, they will walk on the water's edge because it's harder, and they don't like to walk up under the dunes. They would rather walk on the water's edge.
The Fentons and the Paynes and the Saywoods and those people, many years ago, they used to take up to probably a couple of thousand head down there, and nowadays it's restricted to about 220, so.
Another long day, and it's time to rest at Sandy Cape Shack, a place where drovers before like Ben Fenton, Wingy Kay, Jack Booth and Ray Anthony have all spread their swags and topped up on a nip or 2 or 3 of rum to keep the cold out. Tradition with food and rum continues to this day.
I went to those huts, when I was only a kid, but I can well remember the rum bottles and that lined up along the mantelpieces, but nobody ever touched the other fella's rum. It was always just left there. There was pots, pans, everything. No one interfered with any of it. And if anybody went in and used the hut, they always left everything. There was firewood left, there was sticks left to start a fire. But once the bridge went over the river and everybody started going, there was nothing left.
What we're doing now, what we're doing this week, it's like, we're doing a lot easier than the old guys did it. They set off with their horse and their chaff bag for their sleeping bag and their 2 or 3 dogs, and off they went, and the dog caught a rule and they had that for tea, and we're sort of slightly lucky we had a lean lamb last night. So it's just nice to sort of try and think how they were, how hard it was for them back in those days. This trip sort of gives us a little bit of a feel of how they would have felt. And there's areas you ride into today, no matter where it be in Tasmania, and you wonder how, we get there by a road, but them old guys, they had to struggle and trip and fall over logs and open a blaze of trail basically to get there. We really don't realise what they all went through so we could have what we've got today.
There is tension in the air. The men who will take the 10 head down to Don Smith's farm are waiting on the banks of the Pieman River. Soon the drovers will deliver the cows to the other side, then push them into the swiftly flowing, dark tannin waters, as men in boats try to help them navigate their way safely to the other side.
They'll come across pretty well. I don't have any problems, providing they get a boat on the bottom side to keep them up out of from going to sea. Because they'll go down river like. Because when they put them in up there years ago, they'd come out about down here somewhere. Because always go down river. But no, they'll have no problem, I don't think.
The river was a major challenge. The old hands gave us a whole heap of advice about whether the cattle should be swum hot or should be swum cold, and what direction and how to do it, and the way it was in the past. But at the end of the day, the owner of the cattle said, it's time to go. I want to see these cattle cross now. And the adrenaline level flowed. They went in the water with a splash. They all proved they could swim. I think like the general populace, about 10% showed that they wanted to be Olympic swimmers and went straight for their life right across the river. About 70% enjoyed the water and want to swim around for a while and enjoyed themselves before they got out, and about 20% said, no, we don't like this at all, we're going back, and they turned around and headed back to the North Bank, and there was plenty of tension on at that stage, but once again they were remustered, put back in the water, and they crossed safely, and we had a full contingent of cattle on the South Bank later in the afternoon. I felt absolutely elated at the end, like when the last of the cattle came out of the water, I cheered, and there were people around me cheering and clapping at the same time, and whilst there wasn't a big crowd there, and I felt a little bit isolated and alone, I was standing on my own on the south bank of the Pieman River, clapping and cheering and waving my hat around and saying, "You beauty," like, and that's exactly the way I felt, like everything had gone well.
From here, things didn't quite go as planned. The cow that won the river crossing marathon shot through. And no matter what the outrider did, she decided to go bush, and at last report hadn't been seen again. Others decided that the water was too cold and had to be swum 3 times. Others had ropes attached, and when out of the water, it was time to get them off. Well, it's not as easy as you might think. And then the horses decided they'd had enough. Don Smith decided he'd show everyone how it's done. But in the end, all's well that ends well, and the celebrations begin at the big muster at Don Smith's farm at Zeehan.
So the very first time I did this ride, and I came over the Dunnies Lookout, and you look down here to the beach, and in the way distance you can see Sandy Cape Lighthouse. The absolute vastness of it was the main impact that I got, and I thought, my God, we don't have to go all that way, do we? Having been overseas and having been in big cities, one year I went to Europe and then back to England, and I came home, got on my horse, rode on our farm, and I thought, we are just such lucky people to be able to go out and to ride in country like this, and to come down here. I mean, we are living what are other people's dreams. The pioneers of Circular Head, they're the ones who have paved the way, and it's our responsibility to keep their tradition alive, their dream alive, and let some of our young people experience it.
The drive has been an adventure. Look, there's no other way to identify it. It's been full of trauma. There's been adrenaline flowing as the more difficult parts of the drive have been undertaken. The drovers have been very professional, have shown just what the skills of the drovers are. I think it has been an exciting adventure, and I think it's been carried out in an ideal way, and the poets of the future will write about this, I feel quite certain.
Well, I think this area, in particular this area, being anywhere in Tasmania, is big enough for us all to enjoy if we just work together. You know, like, surely we're all sensible people and we can all enjoy bits of everything. We can all enjoy the bird life, we can all enjoy the cattle, we can all enjoy the fishing, the Aboriginal side of it. We can all enjoy everything that's here. If we could just, you know, be educated about it and everybody gets to understand what everybody's actually after, we can come to some agreement where we can all work together.